Well, welcome back, everyone. It is week 2 of season 3 of the Reddit League. I'm Zotomo, and I'm joined by my co-host, as always, Calamity. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. And our guest this week is Tall Impala. We didn't have you on the show last season, so it's great to have a newcomer on the show. How are you doing today?
Hello guys, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we'll be looking forward to getting your input on the results and how the league is shaping up. We're still only in week 2, so give the drivers some time. If they're at the bottom of the table, they won't be there hopefully for the whole season.
Some of them
So
will be.
some of them will be, but they're still in it. Yeah, still plenty of time to turn things around. So with that, let us just jump right in to Division One. Our map for week 2 was Dams of the World, a very interesting themed world map. Yeah, pretty competitive, as you can see from that. So, yeah, Calamity, do you want to let us know how things went here?
Yeah, we had a really difficult seed in Division 1 with one location, like in the middle of nowhere, Russia, one location in the middle of nowhere, Ukraine, and two locations in Thailand. And that is reflected in the scores there. We've only had one score above 24,000 points with Mr. Blue. With an average of only 21,193 points, we had the second lowest scoring division, only ahead of Division 5A. And yeah, the season started badly, and it's not really going any better for Simi now. He had a tough match this week against Stymphalics, but yeah, 0 points after 2 weeks. Not looking great for him. And the same goes for Kevin Kroner. I mentioned in the previous show that I was expecting him to have a really rough time this season, and looks like I'm right so far. Although, as we'll see later, the matchups he has at the beginning of the season aren't really favoring him either. And Anaglu versus Magyaron, actually, because I always like mentioning that, ended up being the closest match of the week that didn't result in a draw. I think it was 112 points here. Yep. But at least Magyaron got a bonus point.
Yeah, so definitely those newcomers really doing quite well even after 2 weeks. And yeah, some of our champions, some of the people who reached the playoffs last season, having a bit of a rough time. Tall, your take on Division One here?
Well, I remember that the seed was clearly not very easy. So I think this is a good week to evaluate the level of the players. So we have a lot of different score with some really close games. But yeah, overall, I think the results are pretty close to what I expected to see. I'm glad to see that Mr. Blue, Radu, and Giovanni or Steam Felix didn't waste the promotion ticket they stole from me. So yeah, but otherwise, yeah, this is a nice performance for the newcomers too. This showed that probably the evolution of the game and the popularity of the tournament has brought a lot of good players, which will not make my job easier to get to the first division, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. For those of you who weren't around for season 2, Tall Impala was in the playoffs for promotion from Division 2 to Division 1, but lost out in the final for that last spot by only
Yeah,
a
thanks for
few
reminding me
points.
this beautiful memory.
So yeah, that's what he's talking about there. So definitely he'll be looking to make up for that this season. But yeah, I would say a few surprises, but again, of course, in Division One, everybody is as good as anybody, I think, on any given day. So it's really hard to call, and everything. The results kind of always turn out to be like, oh yeah, I can see how that happened. But you could also always see it go the other way with how competitive these people are at the top. Let's take a quick look then at the table for Division One after 2 weeks. A bit of movement towards the middle of the table. Mr. Blue, Radu, and Arglu climbing a little bit in the table, with Radu Shuldi dropping down a bit, but our top and bottom stay relatively the same with that. Anything stand out to you after just 2 weeks, Calamity, here?
Yeah, we've got a perfectly symmetrical table in the win-draw-loss ratio here, which always pleases me. Other than that, Office is a bit of an odd one out in the top 4, which you can't see in the table here. but his total score so far is quite a bit lower than the other players up there. He's only got the 8th highest total score of the division. But apart from that, it's obviously very early to call this. But if we replace him with Raidman, then I think this may well be our top 4 at the end of the season. I'm kind of expecting Boxer to stay up there. I'm expecting Mr. Blue to stay up there. Can definitely see Giovanni being up there as well. And yeah, then probably Raidman would be my 4th choice, although you could also have Radu there, I guess.
Yeah. Tall, anything from you here? Do you think Simi and Equinox still have, and even Maguron have a chance to kind of climb out of those relegation spots down there?
Oh, yes, for sure. Well, we are still at the beginning of the season, so I'm not sure that we can conclude much from the result of these first 2 weeks. But I'm not surprised to see players like Boxa at the top of the table. It's pretty different for Orpheus, but I'm still happy to see my old Formula G partner in the 2nd place. So yeah, it's going to be tough for the last 2 finalists to make to get the playoffs, I suppose. But yeah, it's not over. Anyway, it's kind of very exciting to see.
Yeah, very exciting. Definitely something you want to keep watching for sure. Well, then let's take a look at who these players will all be facing off against in week 3, the coming week in Belgium. Calamity, any matchups that stand out to you here?
Well, I mentioned earlier how Kevin Kroner has had a tough start, and well, it's not getting any better. He's not really been up to par with his own scores either. But after fighting against Boxer and Radu, he'll now have to play against Mr. Blue, and then in the week after that against Raidman. So I honestly don't think that not picking up many points in his first 4 weeks is a death sentence for him in the context of this season. But he needs to make sure to step up his game once he comes across opponents he can beat, and that's the part that'll be important for him. This week is also going to be an early season decider for Simi, of course, after playing against Boxer. I feel like he needs to pick up at least 1 point if he wants to keep his chance at the playoffs alive. Just so that he's not on 0 points after 3 weeks. We could actually check that, but I don't think that anyone who had 0 points after 3 weeks last season made it to the playoffs. Apart from that, Orpheus against Magyaran is my match to look out for, because I think they're both sort of a very similar level. And those are the kinds of players that Orpheus needs to beat if he wants to defy the odds and make it to the playoffs in the end. And yeah, interestingly, we don't get a single repeat match this week for Division 1. None of these players have played each other against each other before in Reddit League.
Yeah, Tall, anything you're looking forward to watching?
Yeah, Simi versus Boxa is probably the first real test. I think we have 2 favorites for me, even if the beginning of Simi is not really good. But yeah, probably for him, he does not have an easy match to reverse the trend. But yes, I expect a lot from him. Yeah, indeed, Magyaran versus Orpheus is still an interesting match, I suppose. Yeah, I agree with Calamity for that.
Yeah, I definitely Magyaran and Orpheus and Einarglu and Raidman might be some of the harder ones to call here. But definitely in terms of, already early on deciders that could have deep impact into the end of the season here. Yeah, Simi and Boxa as well. And probably Equinox and Radu here too. They were both playoff.
Radu,
yes, they were.
Radu wasn't.
Equinox
was
came
in
up
the playoffs.
This,
yeah.
Right? Yeah. Equinox was a playoff contender towards the bottom of the table again here. So a newcomer looking to maybe already prove himself against somebody who has quite the strong season last season, but is struggling a bit here and with some form. So that'll make things interesting. Okay, well, let's move on to Division 2 with our players here. And both of my co-hosts today are in Division 2. So yeah, Tall, probably not the performance you were looking for here in week 2.
Yeah. Do I really need to talk about my match?
Yes, go on.
Yeah, well, I think I have two explanations for my result. The first, and probably the most likely, I think, is that those who participate in your show are cursed for the week because it happened to see me too. Yeah, but yeah, the second is probably that I sucked. Yeah, but I don't believe that. It's clearly impossible. Yeah, well, no kidding. I don't really know what to say. I mean, yeah, the result makes me feel a little embarrassed, especially since it happened in the week where I'm invited. So yeah, obviously I didn't play well. I made a huge mistakes in the first round. Probably I wasn't not enough focus. Um, the thing is, I really expected to not have any North American round in my seed. And obviously, the first round of my seed is a North American
Yep.
round. So, yeah, thank you, bye. And well, when you lose all hope of winning during the first round, it's really hard to stay focused and keep the motivation. So, I think Chicago Geoguessr really deserved his win because even with these big mistakes, my score wasn't enough. But yeah, well, I just hope to be better in better condition next week. I mean, the season will be long, so yeah, it's not over.
Yeah, it's definitely not the opponent you wanted with the North American location facing off
Yeah,
against
yeah.
Chicago, who's kind of the North American expert there. Yeah, and his score left you pretty much no room at all to try to get that win there. Yeah, Calamity, not bad from you here, but also Verdoc, worth mentioning, a perfect score, our first one. So.
Yeah, it's the first perfect score we've had in this season, and it's also the only one this week. Yeah, Tolan Pal mentioned it the first round. Is also where I made my mistake of the seed. Interestingly enough, I think not that I disagree. I don't, but I think there's different people, because for me, usually making a big mistake in round one actually somewhat, I wouldn't say calms me down, but it somewhat alleviates the pressure. So I usually, when I make a big mistake in round one, I do better in the other rounds. It often doesn't help anymore because I've already made the mistake. But yeah, it's kind of this. It's the start of a round one curse for me this season. We're gonna see more of that next week in Belgium. But yeah, I'm happy that I picked up my first points in Division 2. And yeah, I've also said it last week about Verdoc, that you're always going to have a tough time when you have to face up against him on a world map, because he's very good on those. And well, I think maybe M the Basement will be less annoyed with his own performance because of Verdoc's perfect score, because at this point it was unlikely for him to pick up any points anyway. Because I had the 6th highest score in the division, so he was like still over 6,000 points away from even getting a bonus point. So yeah, that wasn't going to happen anyway. And also the real Clyde, keeping his run going, and him and Ice are actually the only two people who haven't really put a foot wrong so far. They've both over 49,000 points in the overall score, with I think the next closest people are around like 45, 46,000.
Yeah, and it's really nice to see Radox here picking up a win pretty early on. I think he had to wait to almost the last few weeks last season to get a win. So it's nice. He's already got some points on the table here for him.
Yeah, it was actually
a little bit more confidence.
He sort of rubbed it in towards me when he scored 3 points more than me. And I said to him that if that was what was going to cost me a bonus point, then I was going to be mad. And it would have actually, if Seppo would have gotten a better score than me, I would have had the 7th highest score of the division, and I would have lost out on the bonus point by 3 points. But well, that
very, very
didn't
close.
happen. So glad about that.
Yeah, and it's nice for me. I think Ice was one of my my outstanding players last season, and it's nice to see him doing really well here in Division 2. I think he just missed out on promotion last season. So
yeah, it was 5th,
luckily
I think.
he's carrying a bit of good form into this season at least. So, well, let's take a look at how this table looks for Division 2 after 2 weeks. Ice is sitting at the top of the table, along with Chicago and Real Clyde, undefeated, all three of them. Verdoc, with his perfect score, does move up into fourth place. Calamity also climbs the table quite a bit with his win there. And Seppo and Guelo and M the Basement all still at the bottom here, still looking for a win. M the Basement does have a bonus point he earned, but that's pretty much it for him. Even for this division, Tall, the score differential seems to be somewhat nicely balanced. Some of them seem to be a bit scrambled, but this seems to be reflective in the standings, at least here. But anything stand out to you, Tall, after 2 weeks?
Same things with the first division. It's pretty early to make a conclusion about all these results. Well, I think this ranking is not very, very representative of the level of the players. I mean, look, I'm beyond Calamity, so it's completely absurd.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it shows that it will be difficult to see the real favorites, excepting maybe for Ice Taru. And Chicago Geoguessr, I suppose, with the win. So yeah, Calamity was right in the pre-show. There is a very close competition in our division. We'll have to get all the points possible. And in this sense, I think Werdock has made an incredible operation this week with his bonus point. So good for him. Well, I don't know. I know I'm expected to be a favorite for this season, but I don't share this opinion for different reasons. Mainly because I won't play as intensely as last time. So, well, we'll see. But I don't think
don't sell yourself short quite yet.
I don't think there's a single player on this roster that I wouldn't be afraid to play against. So everyone here looks dangerous, even the newcomers.
Yeah, anything from you here, Clemmy, on the stats and whatnot, and shaping up in Division 2 here?
Yeah, kind of like Tol and Pala said, Verdoc with that bonus point. Bonus points in general are going to be very crucial, especially in divisions that are looking to be so close, like the upper divisions. So getting an additional point is always going to be great for you. So far, it's not looking like a great start to the season for the people who have previously been promoted, except for Ice, who's obviously at the top there. But, M the Basement, Guelo Wizard, and Seppo down there in 10th, 11th, and 12th. They've got their work cut out for them if they want to stay in the division. And, well, I presume they want to. That being said, they haven't played each other at all yet. In fact, the first time we'll see a match between them is in week 6 with M the Basement against Seppo. But they're probably going to need some points in the meantime anyway, unless the only thing they want to fight for is 10th place, and then having to play against Redox in the relegation playoff, as always.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to play Redox in the relegation playoffs, because he's got a kind of a bit of a charm there where he never loses. So
yeah, I think it's also that since the relegation playoffs and promotion playoffs usually are on an AI generated world, I think that's a map that just suits Redox very well. So you kind of don't want, if you want to beat him, you want to beat him during the regular season before that.
Yeah, very nice. One thing I didn't mention in Division 1 is those little arrows on the side. A single arrow indicates the driver, a player has moved 1 or 2 spots in the table, and a double arrow indicates 3 or more places lost or gained, a representative of the color there, green for up and red for down. So if you're wondering, that's the legend for those. Let's take a look at Division 2's. I'm reading the wrong numbers everywhere today. Division 2's matchups for week 3 in Belgium. Doesn't get any easier for you, Calamity, here up against Chicago, but Tall might be looking for a bit of some points here against Redox. So yeah, Tall and Paula, anything looking forward to your matchup next week in Belgium?
Well, Redox, be nice, please. I need some points. Yes, it's always difficult to face Redox. It's not an easy match, I suppose. But yeah, with that, it's same things for M the Basement. I suppose I think he seems to struggle during these first weeks. the next match against Aistaru should be very difficult for him too. So yeah, other than that, yes, all the matches are quite interesting. They are a full American match in a European map. Very interesting, Guerra Wizard versus Tesgotak.
Yeah, it might be interesting to see how that American derby does in a European country. Calamity, you fancy your chances here against Chicago in Europe?
Not really.
He's not
No.
the strongest European player, but he's not bad. He was in Division 1 last season, so
Yeah.
Good luck.
I had a bit of a talk with him beforehand, and he said he actually feels relatively confident about Belgium. And I certainly don't. I think I've made this very clear at this point. Belgium is probably one of my worst European maps. I don't really know why.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's kind of more so even the Dutch-speaking part of Belgium, because I always struggle in the Netherlands a lot as well. And I don't really have a clear explanation for it, but we'll maybe look a bit more into that once we talk about the map at the end.
Yeah.
But yeah, I hope maybe to at least, I mean, I've already played my match, so I know, but I hope that I don't lose too much of a score difference, and I'll be happy with that. But yeah, Radox against Tall Impala is actually a more interesting game than you might think, considering that you finished like in the promotion playoffs twice and Radox finished in the relegation playoff twice. But in both games you've played against each other, as in Season 2 and Season 1 in Mexico and Malaysia, you did win both games, but they were wins by like 206 and 285 points respectively. So they were both very close. But yeah, even without the history of that matchup, we've got some other fun matchups here. There's not really a single one where I'd say someone's definitely going to win, except for maybe you would have said M the Basement Ice, but then we're playing on Belgium, and M the Basement is relatively confident about that.
Yeah, you're right.
And here's probably also a good time to mention that we don't have anyone from Belgium in Reddit League, but we do have 16 people from neighboring countries. We've got 9 people from France, 4 from Germany, and 3 from the Netherlands. So they'll probably all be hoping to get as much of a home advantage as possible without actually being at home.
Yeah, definitely would be a good week for M the Basement to get his first points. That wasn't a bonus point, and maybe steal some points from Ice Star there, but it won't be an easy task for him at all. Okay, well, let's take a look then at our fixtures from Week 2 for Division 3. There we go. Yeah, standing out here, lots of 23 or higher scores. So this probably a bit of an easier seed compared to what we saw in Division 1 and 2 here, Calamity.
Yeah, it wasn't too difficult of a seed. You can see sort of who was having some problems. He came very close to being promoted to Division 2 last season. He put in some great performances and only lost in the promotion playoff to me by a few hundred points, I think. But this season so far, he's had the lowest score of everyone in Uruguay and the second lowest score this week. So I don't know if he just isn't too confident right now or if he doesn't really have the time to practice much. But it's not really looking good for him this season so far if he wants to, make another charge towards the promotion playoff spots. But on the other hand, we can celebrate Goalie's first win since week 5 of season 2. So he'll definitely be happy about that. He's still down in the relegation playoff spots right now, as we'll see soon in the table. But it's a first step in the right direction, at least.
Yeah, anything from you here, Tall? Worth mentioning that both our promoted players and our relegated players, for the most part, are doing quite well in their new division.
Yeah, sure. Well, I can't remember the seed of this division, if it was particularly special or difficult, I don't know. But yeah, here we have very small gaps comparing to the previous divisions. There were also some nice confrontations. So yeah, probably I'm sure that sometimes it came down to details. But yeah, no draw. But I'm happy to see players from Division 2 doing a little better, like, Slovak Goli and Benica. I suspect it's not much fun to lose all the time, so I hope they will be able to join us soon. Yeah, very interesting score.
Nice. Well, let's jump to that table that Calamity mentioned for Division 3 here. Patriots, one of those promoted players from Division 4 last season, keeps his top spot with 2 wins. Ohm 1234 Carr, also a new player to the division, right there with 2. Max FI and Shumil Velosa, all new players also running out that top spot. Yeah, and a very rough start for Redact and Hugo Alvara towards the bottom there. Not too much better from them, Freckles and Slovak Goli, but a little bit of a chance for them there. So anything from you here, Calamity, on the table for Division 3?
Yeah, the thing you have to mention here with Freckles is that he was yellow carded in week 1, and he then had the second highest score in week 2. So his position in the table isn't necessarily representative of his performances so far. Then again, we've seen in the past that usually his best performances are always on world maps. So who knows, he might have lost in Uruguay anyway. But yeah, apart from that, kind of as we've said it in the previous show, that this would be a big possibility. And also, as we've mentioned it last time, we've got a lot of the newcomers up at the front, as well as the newly promoted players. In fact, the sort of the highest person up on the table that's been in Division 3 last season is Fios in 7th. So yeah, it's not looking good for the people who have the experience technically in Division 3. But yeah, it's still very early on, and you've also I think Division 3 is the division that's sort of the most up in the air at the moment, because you've only got 1 point separating 3rd place and 10th place. So a lot could happen still here.
Yeah, anything from you here, Tal?
Well, I think that Patriots and Max FI are the promoted player, right?
Yes, them and closed.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm not surprised to see them at the top of the table. Yeah, there are a lot of good players here, so I suppose the difference will be made by consistency during all the seasons. But yeah, it's pretty close.
Oh, very nice. Yeah, I definitely think that this division, the returning players from last season of Division 3 have the hardest time to stay in the division or get promoted compared to any other division. Well, I think in like 1 and 2 and even 4, the players who just missed out on promotion or saved from relegation have a good chance of either staying or getting promoted. But this one, the newcomers and the strength of those newcomers, definitely a lot is up for grabs here, and will be probably my second favorite division to be watching as the season progresses here after Division 1. So let's jump to those matchups for week 3 in Belgium here. As Calamity said, we don't have anybody from Belgium, but we do have a few Europeans here, especially closed, coming from a nearby country of Germany. So he might do pretty well here. But yeah, doesn't get a whole lot easier for anybody as we go into this week, Calamity.
Yeah, we've actually got with Omkar, which I'm going to call him now until he either corrects me, or I'll just keep doing that because who needs the numbers? Against Closed, Shumi against Patriots, and Max against Fios. They've kind of got a lot of top of the table matches that are keeping between themselves this week, with pretty much 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 7th there. And that is a good chance for the people who are a bit further down the table to pick up some much needed points here. Redirect against Benica, sort of a North American, not really a derby, but a duel there for some crucial points. And Freckles against Slovak Goli from 9th to 10th, also going to be very important for both of them to get a good result there. And on the other hand, of course, Omkar against Closed, Shumi will also against Patriots, as I've said, very high-profile matches there. And as you can see in the standings, sort of at the top of Patriots, or Omkar managed to get a win there. they might well sort of pull away from the people that are trying to follow them. That would be obviously very good for their season.
Yeah. Anything you notice here? Anything looking forward to seeing, Tall?
Yeah, I can see a very interesting match between Max FI and Theo ZA, but yeah, I pretty agree with what Calamity said just before. The global table can drastically change with the result of this week, I suppose. Yeah, and it's a good test to see if players like Omka is the right sentence. Yes.
Yeah,
It's
I'm just
Omka.
gonna call him
Yeah.
Omka. He can correct us
Omka,
if he
right.
wants.
Yes, if his presence is justifying the first part of the tables. So yeah, it's a good test for him, I suppose, to face off close 24/7.
Okay, well then let's take a look at the Division 4A results from week 2 here. Yeah, lots of Americans, including a American derby here between H-Town and we're going with LCN, right?
Yes.
For this one, all lowercase. So for that, yeah, pretty good results all around again. Quite a few above 23 or so, almost 24. So probably a bit on the easier side, so to speak. So yeah, Calamity, anything stand out to you here in these results from week 2?
The main thing that stands out to me is because you didn't have the graphics ready at the time of recording last week, so I haven't actually seen that representation of the Welsh flag. That looks like a 4-year-old has drawn it. But
sorry.
Talking about the results, they were actually pretty straightforward. Everyone who won their game from week 1 also won their game in week 2. And Mabos, who got a yellow card in week 1, also won his game against Hedigme, which was pretty much the only other match in there, that didn't have someone who had already won their game in week 1. Therefore, I think that's probably what we'll then have to expect going forward into the season. Although Hedigme has shown some good performances, so maybe he can also fight for the promotion playoffs. As we'll look at the table a bit later on, well, I'll say that later on, actually, when we're actually looking at it. I think that makes more sense.
Yeah, Pwn Noob, if you have a better, like a image of the flag that we can use, feel free to send it to me. I'm sorry, the map pack that I have, the Welsh flag is not the most flattering. I'll give you that. Yeah, anything from you here, Tal and Paula?
Well, first, I never see that there are a big duality between English speaker and French speaker in these divisions. It's quite funny.
Yeah.
Other than that, yeah, every player scored more than 20,000 K. So we can consider, I suppose, that it's a pretty close game for everyone. I don't know. Yeah, the match between Wakelock and Barry Fishy Beer was quite interesting. Yeah. I don't really know what to say more about that.
Yeah.
It's pretty difficult. It's very hard to predict this kind of divisions. I know, well, we have some known names from the competitive sense, very strong. Others a little less frequent or that I don't know. So, yeah.
Yeah, but nonetheless, putting up some very good scores in the competition. So let's move over to that 4A table. See how they did. As Calamity mentioned, those top 4 all winning again this week, and very little change. NB Spaceman and Barry Fishy Bear do swap spots. And Mabos, who was yellow carded in the first week with his win, jumps all the way up to 6th from the bottom. So that was, good thing from him, not missing a second week in a row to drop out, and makes up for that lost time. But yeah, a bit worrying here for Wakelock and Itnarok. Already towards the bottom of the table. It's only 2 weeks in, but not the start they were probably looking forward to, Calamity.
Yeah, Wakelock is kind of similar to Hugo, showing how close margins can quickly make things go wrong. He failed to keep his spot in Division 3 last season by only 130 points, and suddenly he finds himself at the bottom of Tier 4. But kind of, if you look at the Division 3 seed, actually, of last week's map on Dams of the World, he actually had the highest score out of everyone. So maybe just a case of he was a bit unlucky on his own seed there. And maybe the locations didn't really favor him. That's something I know very well myself, that you're just better at some locations than others. And if you get unlucky with the seed, then you're just gonna have a tough time. And I'm confident that he's definitely got the skill to at least keep himself in the division and not get relegated. But he's gonna need a couple points to do that.
Yeah, anything from you here, Tal and Paula, in this one?
Yeah, I expected a better result for Nitnerok on Wakolok. So yeah, it's a bit surprising to see them in the last part of the table. So well, I suppose it's like the other divisions. I suppose the season will be long, and I think the table will change a lot during the next weeks.
Yeah, definitely. We've been saying it all evening, but yeah, definitely. We're only 2 weeks in. Things can definitely shift. People like LNC or Ponoob could have 2 wins all season, and they picked them up in the first 2 weeks, so they look really good now. But what is maybe interesting to note here is that the aces for everybody is pretty even, 3 or 4, with a couple at 2 across the board. So I definitely think that some of these scores are kind of very close, very competitive, at least here. They're all getting maybe an ace or 2 a game, and then the rest of it is a bit of a struggle. So yeah, definitely interesting to see that stat for that.
Yeah, I think also, like, just going into the future, I think aces are actually a pretty interesting addition to the table in and of itself. Because just looking through it, it's also very interesting to see how currently, despite the lower time limits, just the quality of play makes up for it in the upper divisions, and we still see more aces there than we see in the lower divisions, even though the people there have a lot more time. But as we go on, we kind of sort of we'll probably get the case where the best players of the really low division, like Division 4 and Division 5, are going to have a lot of aces. Probably more so even than the people in Division 1, 2, 3 maybe, just because the additional time they have, whereas the people towards the lower end might end up with very few aces over the course of the season.
Yeah, it was a stat that really proved itself last season, and we didn't really have a way to show it week to week. So this season we added it to the table to hope to kind of show off just that. A bit of another way to understand the scores the players are putting up. How many of those rounds are they getting a perfect score on, even if they don't have a good game? Maybe it was just one bad round that wasn't very good, or was it a complete blowout where they didn't get anything in any round? And that's kind of what aces can help you see.
Yeah, that's usually the thing. When you see someone who's very high up in the table with very low amount of aces, you can kind of guess that they're very consistent. They might not be able to pinpoint very well, but their scores are, like, they always find a place, but struggle with, maybe down a road or 2. Whereas if someone's very far down with a lot of aces, that indicates that they're a very good player usually, but prone to making big mistakes, which obviously then leads to losses and doesn't reflect well on the table.
Yeah. Well, let's look at the 4A fixtures for week 3 here. Probably we still don't have an English derby here. We'll have to wait a bit for that. But of course, with so many Americans, we have another American derby, and our French derby is this week. So that'll be interesting. Tal, anything you might want to say here about that French matchup?
Well, I don't know. It's me, right?
We don't know.
So, so it's pretty difficult to make a prediction about this match. But yes, it's very fun to meet the real head-to-head against 2 French people. So yeah, H-Town 40 against Wakolox should be interesting too. Pondum versus Very Fishy Beer 2. Well, every match should be interesting here for this week, I suppose.
Yeah, Ponoob and Bear Fishy Bear both towards the top of that table there, and H-Town and Wakolok, having been around for a bit, are some seasoned players. So it'll be interesting to see how they do. Calamity, anything you notice here in Division 4A?
Just a lot of what has already been said. You've got the US derby between MD Spaceman and Marbos, which I think is going to be very interesting because they've both won all their matches they've taken part in, which means 2 for MD Spaceman, 1 for Marbos. Same as Pont Noob and Berry Fishy Bear. So those are probably the sort of high-profile matches of the week for Division 4A. And obviously, as we've said, the French derby. Hedigme actually not got a win yet, but 3 points in the table. So that shows that he has performed well, but maybe just got unlucky with his matchups with a draw and a loss, but bonus points in both weeks there. And yeah, as you said, Wakelock against H-Town is going to be a crucial matchup for both of them. As you said, they've both been around last season. I think Wakelock was around in season 1 as well. I don't think H-Town was. So they've both got quite a bit of experience now. And still they find themselves sort of in the lower edge of the table. So they'll both want to win in that one.
Yeah, it should definitely be interesting indeed. Well, let's shift over to B in Division 4A. Each of these divisions have 2 groups to them. So finally get to my name, way far away from you two in Division 2. It took us a while to get there, but we do eventually. And I get through by the skin of my teeth again here. Just nicked out a draw last time and just get a win here. So I'm definitely testing luck after the first 2 weeks here. But anything else from you here, Calamity, on those matchups?
Yeah, we had a yellow card for GRH77. Though,
I forgot to do
yeah. Funnily enough, he actually played the game after the deadline, but got only 142 points more than the yellow card gave him. So apart from him now having no wiggle room to miss another game, it doesn't really matter for his standing in the table. Apart from that, we didn't really have any real surprises, in my opinion. Though only Steal the Snick actually managed to get a repeat victory from last week.
Yeah, anything from you here, Tall?
Well, first, brilliant performance from the Japanese players, Zotomo. I think he must be happy, I guess, right?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, against Nakiro, it's a pretty good performance, I suppose.
I was really scared.
Yeah, and it was a pretty hard week for all the newcomers, right?
Except, yeah.
Yeah.
Steal the Snick won, but I think apart from him, every newcomer lost. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Polybus, Nakiro, Pashtetli.
Yeah.
Edward is a newcomer as well as Steal the Snick, so he did lose. To speak to what Calamity mentioned earlier, like there's just some rounds where you're just worse at. I think I practiced this seed like 10 times. I had a Japanese seed in every single one of them. I didn't have a single Southeast Asian seed. And the actual seed had no Japanese. It had a Thai round instead. And a couple European stuff. So it was like, oh, great. So I was like really excited about playing, like, oh, I'll get to, have a Japanese. I can probably get an ace in that one and whatnot. But nope, not in the actual one. So my score is a little bit lower than this. Might have been one of my lowest, even in my practice rounds, which I practice on shorter times. So very, very lucky. And just that it was a bit rough for Nakiro as well. That kind of led me to steal that win there. But yeah, okay, well, let's take a look at the table then for Division 4. All those mid-pack players all jump up. Deep Thought, me, Porksteaks, and Noisel with our wins there after laws or drosses respectively in week 1, which then means Nakiro, Polybus, and Pashtetli all move down in the table. Still is Nick keeping his place at the top, with Edward and GRH at the bottom as well. Well, maybe interesting note here, Calamity, almost everybody has at least a point already in this division.
Yeah, this is kind of the table that looks the closest just by looking at points, because you've pretty much got every number represented here apart from 2. But yeah, it's certainly still very close here. Maybe less so, because if you looked at it before, I said in Division 3, I think it was only 1 point between 3rd and 10th. Here you've still got, like, if you look at, it's kind of 3 points between 1st and 8th, but kind of no matter which places you compare, you still don't end up as close as in Division 3. But because the top 2 and the bottom 2 in Division 3, I think, are a bit further apart, the table doesn't look as close. But yeah, it's pretty much from what we've seen so far, it's you've got the favorites at the top, I think, but it's also the sort of the toughest division for newcomers, based on where they're positioned out right now.
Yeah. Tall, anything from you in Division 4B?
Yeah, pretty close for my expectation for these divisions. But yeah, well, I said before, but generally we will tend to consider that those we know will do better. So yeah, it is probably not so obvious. But yeah, let's see if Zotomo will be able to get this promotion ticket. Oh no, it's not a promotion, right? It's a playoff, right?
Yeah, only
the
only
top
first.
place.
Yeah, so I wish you good luck for that.
Thank you. Yeah, the top spot gets an automatic promotion. The other ones go into a playoff for one promotion spot. So it's like, I think this season there's 4 of us, well, the top 4 players besides the first place will go into a playoff for one spot. So very, very competitive. Yeah, I will be happy to make the playoffs this season for sure. That'll be a goal to reach first before I worry about anything else. So let's jump then to the fixtures for next week for this division. For me, I've got Neusel, which was my bane in last season. So this, I think, definitely is going to be a decider for whether or not I'm going to be able to put up a promotion challenge here in this week. But other than that, maybe Steal This Nick and Pork Steaks, both towards the top of the table there, Calamity.
Yeah, Steal This Nick's Pork Steaks could definitely be interesting. We've seen Steal This Nick currently at the top of the table with 6 points so far, and Pork Steaks has also been around since season 1 and has just recently been relegated in last season. Also, like, your match against Neusel is the only other repeat match this week apart from Radox, Tall and Pala. I didn't just forget mentioning them. Over the whole league, we only have 2 games this week that have happened before, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, the last time you matched up against Neusel, Neusel dominated that in Lesotho.
Was it? I forget. Was it a world map or a country map?
It was Lesotho, and he won by like 7,000 points.
Yeah, I learned Lesotho from that week, but not when I played it.
Learned it retrospectively.
Now I do pretty well, but yeah. Tall and Paula from you here. Probably the bottom matchup, GRH and Edward. They're up against each other here. So
Still this Nick has a good opportunity to make a good difference against Pork Sticks, I suppose. I don't know what you're feeling about Belgium, Zotomo, but yeah, I can bet on your win for this week.
Eventually we'll have a Swiss derby here in this division, but be a couple weeks, I think, before we get to that one. Anyway, let's jump over then to our final division, 5A and B. First 5A, and definitely the matchup we were kind of spouting off about last time was that One World Girl and NNZ and Calamity. That One World Girl just edging it out here.
Yep, not the highest scores overall over the whole Division 5A. I actually mentioned it last week how Division 5A got like 2,500 points on average more than 5B. This week it's the other way around pretty much, with 5B getting 1,500 points more than 5A, which is interesting for me going forward, whether that's just coincidence basically, or whether 5A maybe prefers country maps and 5B is doing better on world maps. But I'll keep an eye on that going forward in the season. But yeah, as you said, that One Weird Girl with a very important win there over NNZ, which keeps her towards the top of the table, and for NNZ means he's still at the bottom. with no points out of his first 2 matches. And also, I mentioned last week his streak of always being in the lowest 3 scores of his division. That keeps going. I'm just going to keep an eye on that. But yeah, as well as that, Diffs, however you want to pronounce him, as Mr. Blue said rightly in the comments last week, he had a home map last week in Uruguay. So he got his win there, and this week he seems to have fallen off quite drastically. So we'll also keep an eye on that. Maybe he struggles on anything not Uruguay. We'll see. But yeah,
he was a reserve driver in Formula G, so he did put up some pretty decent scores on some maps there, but seems to have a little bit of a hard time translating that over to Reddit League form for a bit. But yeah, Tal and Paul, anything noticeable from you here in these scores?
Yeah, well, this time I'm even more in the dark. So I think it would be pretty inconclusive if I try to present my opinion on these divisions. No offense for that, for all the players. Well, so I hope the newcomers enjoy participating anyway. I'm surprised to see a player like Diesel in the lower division. I remember to see his name in other competition in a good place, but I suppose that places were expensive during the pre-season. He was a bit unlucky, so his result was pretty good in this week. It's clearly what I expected from you. For the other, pretty close results. 2 again.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning that even though we're in Division 5, like these aren't bad players by any means. Like how competitive it is in the qualifying matches, players can see themselves in Division 5 or Division 4 only losing by over the whole of qualifying maybe a few thousand points, right? So it's very, very tight. And so while they have more time and the scores might not always look as nice, they're still competing on a time limit and very tough seeds and maps that aren't standard. Most people tend to play the same map over and over, but Reddit League will really test you playing different maps and country-specific maps and things you maybe have never played before. So these players do have quite a bit of skill, even if they're down here. So but we don't want to write them off too quickly. In the competition.
Yeah, let me just jump in there because I want to mention 2 things. So one that I forgot earlier and one that relates to what we just talked about. We also had our only draw of the whole week here with Marcus Fenn against Hexalt, which actually surprised me quite a bit that we only get 1 draw for a world map, which usually provides a lot of draws, maybe slightly because of the fact that Dams of the World plays more like a rural world, which usually, mitigates that effect of having more draws on a world map a bit, but still interesting. And the other thing was, as Tom Powell mentioned, Diesel, for me as well, I've seen him before with quite good results, and he finished 19th in preseason, and basically you had to finish 17th or above to get into Division 4. So he was the highest seed, so to speak, from the preseason into this division. But there was actually quite a big gap between 18th and 17th, which might be why Schmingo drew the line there, but it probably is just because of how the numbers matched up. But there were 2,700 points between 17th and 18th, whereas, for example, from like 17th to 9th all the way up, there is only like 4,600 points. So that was an interesting gap there.
Yeah, interesting indeed. But yeah, we're still talking about like a few thousand points over.
Yeah,
it was 5 weeks of qualifying.
Yep, 5 weeks.
Right. So that's like, maybe what
one bad round pretty much.
Yeah, one bad round in 5 games out of 25 rounds, and you're dropped all the way down from Division 2 to Division 5. So very, very competitive even at this level. So well, let's kind of keep things moving here. Sorry. And we get to look at the table for Division 5A. A little bit of movement all around here. Jay Lyons does snip that top spot from that one world girl despite her win over Anna NZ. And yeah, Anna NZ does stay stuck at the bottom of the table with Markuson's
Marcus Fenn.
Marcus Fenn. Okay, that's where I put the space in the name. Marcus Fenn getting that draw against Hexalt for there. But yeah, I mean, we talked about how Diffs was having a bit of a trouble here, but he's in the middle of the table. And Diesel is in third place as well. So not a whole lot to say. Again, we're only in week 2, but it's proving a little bit interesting. It is worth noting that we do have 3 players who still have no aces after 2 weeks, including that one world girl who is in second place. So maybe, as we mentioned before, that that stat of her being consistent across the board, but then struggling to pinpoint versus being able other players who just have 1 or 2 bad rounds, but able to pick up an ace here or there is worth noting. Well, then let's jump to the results. Actually, no, not the results. The matchups for week 3 in 5A. Yeah, doesn't get too much easier for Anna NZ, but she does face a fellow low table player in in Marcus Fenn, Calamity.
Yeah, so that's probably his best chance to pick up points this season, unless he either gets to a map that he favors over some that we have so far, or he gets lucky, or magically improves a lot. You never know. But yeah, apart from that, some interesting matches again, but mostly one favorite, maybe not necessarily in their skill, but it's still hard to judge that, but at least going off of their position at the table, where we've got that one weird girl in second against TDYS in fifth, and then we've got Jake Lyons against Zenit's fourth, like first against fourth. So we've got a lot of matches that are relatively high up on the table, but with one favorite on paper.
Yeah, so we'll be interested to see if those favorites do actually play out that way. Tall, Diesel or Hexalt, do you fancy their chances here in week 3?
Yeah, definitely. Labengred versus Diesel should be a very interesting match, I suppose. Yeah, there's no direct confrontation between the 3 first players of the division. So yeah, it's an interesting week. We'll see if at the end of this week we can see a difference with the previous table.
Okay, well then let's jump over to our last group, Division 5B here. And yeah, so better scores all around as we look at those scores in particular, but still some veterans struggling a bit with Papagato and Steven, Calamity.
Yeah, I mentioned last week about how Papagato got yellow carded, and I hadn't heard anything of him. So it's good news that he is still playing and trying his best, but just falling short by only 286 points there against Jack Hertzberg, which is unfortunate for him. He could have used those points after the yellow card in week 1, but it's at least a promising showing for him. It's not a complete blowout. And Steven as well, just 2,000 points short of Geoguessr there. So he's staying on 0 points as well. Apart from that, Faraban, after his internet issues last week, he's starting his season, technically, if you ignore week 1, with a great score there against Vincenzo, who actually was the person who had the highest preseason score out of everyone in Division 5. So he was 18th basically in preseason. That's not paid off for him yet. He's only got 1 point so far. And Bubba the Bubba with a great performance this week with the highest score of Division 5B. Let me actually check. Was it the highest score of... Yeah, it was the highest score of all of Division 5 even. So he really showing up on the world map there.
Nice. Let's move over to the table then and see how they do. Juggler and Calamity.
I mean, it's Geoguessr and it's Karciarz, something like that. He's from Poland, which not a language I can speak or pronounce very, very well.
Yeah. Moving up on the table on score difference over Jack Hertzberg, despite all of them having wins. Middle of the table, a bit of a shuffling around for them. The big movement here was, Firebrand FR having trouble in the first week, which is why his score difference is so out of whack. Does pick up a win and moves him up to table to 7th, which means the other players drop down from their positions there. Yeah, anything interesting for you here, Tal?
Yeah, well, I expected to see some French player on the upper division, so I'm pretty happy to see Geoguessr in the first place, and I hope it will be the same thing for Faraman. The score difference is pretty interesting these times. Especially with the positive score for Geoguessr on 59 soundbout. Very interesting. Yeah, but again, I think your Aces column is very interesting. I suppose regularity is the key for all these players for all the season.
Yeah, definitely. Indeed. Yeah. 2 players, Bubba the Bubba and Danny Blondes already with 5 aces compared to most of the other field who are barely able to get 1 or 2. So yeah, a bit unfortunate there for Papagato and Steven are veterans with 0 after 2 rounds. Not a very good stat for them. So they'll be looking to change their fortunes in week 3 when they go up against some very tough competition, at least for Steven. Danny Blondes has put up some good numbers here. But Calamity, anything noticeable from you here?
Yeah, we've got Geoguessr against Jack Hertzberg as the high-profile match of the week for Division 5B, first place against third place. And after his absence in week 1, with Farban, who, as I've said before, second highest score in week 2. So his match against current second place in the table with Karciarz could also end up pretty close. Then we've just got a lot of matchups that might be important for the lower places down the table. And, because you kind of want to at least finish comfortably in the mid-table so that you don't actually have to re-qualify for Reddit League next season. I think we've mentioned that shortly before, that if you finish in sort of the bottom places of week 5, you're at risk of dropping out of the league system entirely and will have to re-qualify to take part, sort of to not have the whole system get out of hand and then have, 200 players in a couple of seasons, which is just, not intended.
Yeah, so if you just drop out, you're no longer a maybe professional or status, so to speak, but rather in more of an amateur league or something, kind of comparing it to like a soccer system or something like that. But yeah, definitely should be interesting for week 3 in all of our matchups, because as we'll get to now, the map is Belgium. And I know, Calamity, you have a lot to say, but let's try to keep it a little bit short. We've already kept everybody for quite a long time today. Week 3 is just Belgium by a name I'm not going to try to pronounce, with an average score of 21,000. It has a relatively easy rating, according to Geoguessr. Over 50,000 locations, though. So small country, but they really pack them in. It's been played about 419 times with 10 likes. Yeah, basic description. It's just a map of Belgium with a lot of locations. So...
Yep.
Yeah, maybe we'll let Tal get a little bit of a word here in first before Calamity tries to go off. So, Tal, your thoughts on Belgium?
Yeah, well, so I'm not sure to be the best expert to talk about this country, but I'm still happy to do it because it's probably my favorite country in game and in real life. I mean, I have a strong experience of it for personal and professional reasons, but I don't think that it gives me a real advantage for my next match against Radox. Belgium is a country that on the world map is often an easy round, but in the conditions of the Reddit League, I think it will be a bit different. Obviously, it probably depends on the difficulty of the seed. but we'll have to be extremely fast and precise to hope to make a real difference. So yeah, it's likely that for the simpler seed or in the lower division with more time, the gaps will be minimal in the end. And regarding the specificity of the country, well, most of them are known to all. Obviously, there is a linguistic separation of the territory with Flanders and Wallonia. I don't know if it's easy or not to distinguish them for the other players, or if the fact of being French-speaking helps me a lot. Well, otherwise, very often the name of the city is indicated on the street signs, and the road network the major road network is quite good. Yeah, it's another thing for the small road. Yeah, on more isolated road, you will have to be able to read the landscapes. Globally, the southeast part is much more hilly and forested with the presence of the Ardennes, while the west corresponds to a large basin which opens on the sea, flat, agricultural. So yeah, I won't mention all the nuances to keep a possible advantage, but I think that, yeah, with this knowledge, we can already do well, I suppose.
Yeah, Calamity.
Yeah, if I had to compare Belgium to any of the maps we've played so far, because I always like doing that, I'd say it comes closest to Sweden, where most of the time you'll just be searching for signs to different cities, and all you'll find will be small towns that are like 1 or 2 kilometers away. There's two pretty big differences between the two, but I actually think they sort of cancel each other out, so they end up feeling similar anyway, where Sweden is a lot bigger, but especially, with Belgium being split apart by language, effectively making your search radius even smaller. But on the other hand, Belgium is much more densely populated, meaning upon zooming in, you'll be overwhelmed by hundreds of small villages. And sort of as it is for both of them, unless you know the place mentioned on the signs or you recognize it from somewhere, you never really know if it's something you can find on the map. As Tom and Paula said before, you've got the splits between the languages, between Wallonia and Flanders, which kind of, for me, supersedes the difference in landscape. Because as you said, sort of course, the east is more hilly, the west is more flat, but that kind of is pretty much decided by the language anyway. So, if you see hills, you're probably in Flanders. But if I'm gonna see French language, I know that anyway. So I personally didn't pay too much attention to landscape while practicing. Because even if you might not find useful or particularly useful signs, you're definitely going to find language in the amount of time you have. And yeah, it's interesting. The road network, like it's very dense, and you'll usually find, well, not usually, but you'll often find signs with road numbers on them, especially in the more urban areas. But it's not perfectly well ordered. The numbers, you can find a road that's like, I don't know, N224, that's 100 kilometers away from N225. So it can still trip you up like that.
Yeah, but it's better than in France, right?
Yes.
Yes, we'll do that. Yeah, definitely better than France. One thing is I've been trying to practice a little bit with the area codes, because I'm like, well, it's a small country, that might help you a little bit. But what I've been noticing is that a significant proportion of the area codes are all cell phone area codes. So if I see 9 out of the 10 phone numbers I see are cell phone area codes, so they don't really help you narrow down the location. So I kind of gave up after about 2 or 3 games of even looking at a area code map. And it's like, this isn't really going to do me a whole lot of good. But yeah, definitely the language, the town names on the signs, if you already can narrow down a search area, is definitely very, very helpful. One thing to note that happened to me 3 times in my practice games already is you have a high likelihood of being spawned on or near the border.
Yeah.
And given how open EU borders are, you might go to a different country and not realize you switched countries. I was all of a sudden seeing Luxembourg cities everywhere, and I was like, wait a minute, what happened to Belgium? I had to turn around. But that could also be very helpful. Like if you cross a border, you can maybe notice a change in the signage for the different country and whatnot, or even different city names, and that can tell you you're on a very close border location. So definitely a very interesting map for our competitors in week 3. Yeah. Yep. So that'll do it for us this week. We'll see you all next time. Take care.
Bye.
Goodbye.